Hey everybody, it's Skully. I just got done battling coronavirus for the second time now, so that was fun. But, you know, same old, so I'm just back to making videos now. so, um, while I was away, I kind of had an idea as to something interesting I could discuss in today's video. Have you ever wondered when you met somebody, when you make a first impression, do you ever wonder how accurate that can be? Do you always get a second chance to make a first impression if it didn't go so well? How exactly do first impressions work when you meet somebody or even just talk to somebody for the first time? Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about today. So, when I like to think of first impressions, I'm a pretty big fan of the coin analogy. Heads or tails, one side or the other. Anytime you flip a coin, there's always the 50-50 shot. You either get heads or tails. You don't ever see both sides of the coin at the same time, and that can be good or bad. Well, when it comes to something like a first impression, because you're going to only see one side of the coin at the time, in this case being the person, you're going to either catch them in a good mood or a bad mood. The situation's going to either go well or it won't. That can, in some cases, actually, really most cases, make the first impression very biased. Now, first impressions can be good with getting to know people because if it's something like a job interview, people want to get a good feel as to who you are very quickly. Like, especially if you're applying for a job, they want somebody who's able to do the job. They want somebody who's right for the job. Like, that's something that's very, very important, especially going forward and establishing a business relationship. But then there are times that good impressions don't always work out as planned. People don't always get the chance to make another first impression, and that can be pretty damaging in some situations because, you could be talking to somebody who's actually a nice person, but that you could have caught them in a bad mood. They could have said something and maybe they meant it a certain way and it came out wrong. I mean, there's just so many different endless possibilities of things that can happen in situations like that. And let's face it, I'm sure we've all been in at least one situation that ended like that, and we didn't always get the second chance to try to fix that. So sometimes you do hear situations where maybe the person is fortunate enough to get to talk to that person again, and they're like, hey, I know we got off on the wrong foot, let's try again. Or, hey, I hope I get another chance at a second first impression, because the first one didn't go so well. So although a first impression can be a good idea indicator as to how somebody can be, they can be flawed in many ways because of the coin analogy that I like to come up with. When you only see one side of the coin at a time, you don't see the other side. There could be a lot of vital information on that so called other side of the coin that you never get to see because you only got to talk to them for a few minutes. So, although it's a quick way to get to know somebody, I'm also a big fan of, I mean, again, you don't always get the chance to make a second first impression or get another chance to talk to somebody. And in some situations, that can be a good thing because if you really had bad vibes about somebody, you don't want to talk to them again. Sometimes it's just like that. You're better off just like, okay, that person really creeped me out. I'm just going to steer clear. So if you were talking to them for like a few minutes and you really had bad vibes for your safety, if you wanted to steer clear of that person, that's understandable. But in some cases, if somebody is fortunate enough to make a second impression, that can actually speak pretty loudly. Because sometimes people can screw up in situations, they can realize it, they can feel weird about it, and how they handle the second time around can actually say a lot about them. They take it very seriously, they apologize, they really go out of their way to really prove you wrong. It's like they say, actions can speak louder than words, and oftentimes they do. So that kind of goes back to the overall question of when you think of a first impression, how accurate are they? Just as a general thought. Well, that can depend on the person. Some people can find them pretty accurate, can rely on them pretty often. Again, like in business settings, some people, I think a fair amount of people know they're not always accurate all the time. They might give people a second chance. So is it fair to put a number of accuracy on it? Maybe. If I think about it like a coin, I think 50-50 is probably about right. They can be pretty accurate, sometimes not. So, okay, somebody makes a lousy first impression. Would you give the person a second chance or not? Well, there's not really a right or wrong answer to this question. And I think it can be pretty circumstantial depending on how things went. somebody goofs up a little bit. Maybe, they're standing there talking, they turn to go do something, maybe they almost about trip over something and they feel kind of silly. Okay, we all have kind of embarrassing moments like that. No big deal. But if somebody really gives you bad vibes, like you're afraid to really, again, like I said before, you're afraid to go near them, talk to them again. Sometimes things like that can happen unintentionally too. Some people can be socially awkward, they don't always know social cues. And for those kinds of people, first impressions can be very harsh because people like that struggle with that concept on a regular basis, and it's not usually their fault in a lot of cases. It takes time to learn how to socialize with people, understand body language, when people are and aren't okay with certain behaviors, certain conversations. So for somebody who consistently has difficulties in that department, they really benefit from people who look beyond the first impression and give them the opportunity to try again. Because sometimes people do need to try again. Some people need a second chance with first impressions more than other people. So it seems only fair to provide accommodations when necessary in some situations. Like if the person seems like a nice enough person, you might give them a second chance. But the thing is, I've always found first impressions to be really pretty subjective, where if you want to give the person another chance, that's totally up to you. And if you don't, that's fine too. But also keep in mind, when it comes to first impressions, you really are looking at people on a surface level. Now, there can be a lot of things on the surface that are very important to look at. But if it's like the tip of the iceberg, where maybe 25% of it's at the surface and 75% is down below eye level where you can't see it, think about all the stuff you're missing because you can't see it. What else is in that iceberg? What else is hiding in all that ice? What's buried below the water level that you can't see? If you dig deep enough to find it, well, you actually learn some pretty interesting things about this person. Or, well, it can be the opposite. This person can seem really nice on the surface. You dig deeper, maybe you start to see some red flags, some deep secrets, things that scare you. Well, that goes to show you that sometimes even a second chance at a first impression can also backfire. But you get to know anybody enough, you're going to look beyond that tip of that iceberg. You're going to dig deeper deeper in the water, and you're going to see a lot more than what you saw at the surface. Because there's a lot of things we hide from people when we first meet them, not only to protect ourselves, but to make a good first impression. But you don't always get to see below eye level. You don't get to see below the surface with every person. So the more you think about certain people throughout your life, the more people you meet, it really does start to raise a lot of questions. Like, what if, hey, if I would have gotten to know this person more, would I have actually liked them more? Or would I have actually learned some pretty dark secrets about them that maybe I was thankful that things didn't work out? So, yeah, first impressions can be very difficult. Sometimes helpful, sometimes not. So when you're going into a first impression, take them seriously like anything. But keep in mind, the surface level. What do people need to see on the surface, what not? And this can be very, very hard for people to learn throughout their life. But if we're talking about surface level, we're going to start with things like, maybe I'm going to talk about my favorite movie, my favorite food, or just general topics of discussion. I know some people, when it comes to making first impressions, it's a fine line of, do I tell them information about myself, or do I ask them questions about themselves? And there's a fine balance with that also, which can also make getting to know somebody very difficult, because you might just be so excited to tell somebody about you that you inadvertently spill too much information, or you spend more time talking about yourself than asking them questions. And I think that's a pretty common thing that people do, because people like to talk about themselves, their achievements, things that they're proud of, and they know themselves better than the other person, so it only makes sense. So keep in mind that when that person is also sharing things with you about themselves, again, try to really keep it at a surface level, because sometimes people can accidentally ask somebody really personal questions and not think about it, because some people can be an open book. They like to talk about personal things, or they may ask questions that to them are not a big deal, but to somebody else, especially if it's things like trauma or just things that they just are very private, people can inadvertently ask you like political questions, religion, and again, some things that some people don't mind talking about, other people really go out of their way to avoid. And that can be a perfect example as to how a first impression can go really wrong depending on the scenario, because it could be a very innocent question where the person is like, oh my gosh, why did they just ask me a political question? Why did they just ask me my beliefs? And I've had people ask questions like that as a very excited, like they just really wanted to share common interests, and I had no problem with that. But if had it been somebody else, they might be like, whoa, I don't know this person, why are they asking me this? So that might be a little hard to converse with that person again later if they're a little spooked by a personal question. So use a first impression to your advantage. Use it as an opportunity to shine, to really be yourself like you normally would. But it's kind of like taking a portion of yourself and think of it like giving it to somebody as a free sample. What flavor do they want to try first? Do they want to try sweet? Do they want to try salty, bitter, sour? Because there's so many flavors to one person when it comes to their personality. So you're giving somebody a small portion of your heart, who you are. Maybe they'll accept it graciously, maybe they won't. It's hard to offer somebody a piece of your heart on a silver platter like that and to get rejected. But don't be discouraged, keep trying. There's so many different people out there with different tastes and things, different hobbies. And you'll find somebody who's compatible with you. Because this world is far too big for there to not be somebody who likes you. I mean, come on. Billions of people in the world. You're going to find somebody that you click with. Big, little fish in a big ocean. Keep searching the ocean. Keep swimming. Keep searching. There's people out there. And you'll get better at it. So, until next time. Have a great day, guys.